Hey, so today I want to talk about Russell Westbrook, and to start that conversation, I want to highlight something Bill Simmons said on his podcast.
But when Derek Thompson came on and we talked about some version of this, and he was saying, I am a diehard basketball fan who doesn't watch basketball that much, but I love the whole circus of basketball. I love listening to podcasts about it. I like consuming the highlights of it. And I was saying that's basically my son. My son barely ever watches basketball with me, but knows what's going on, knows who all the players is, has an Anthony Edwards opinion, and is just basically getting this through. So
I think Simmons brings up an excellent observation. And as we step closer to NBA discourse being dominated by highlights and Twitter, I think we'll continue to see more and more bad takes. The one I want to talk about today is one I see often. Something to the effect of Westbrook is a top 5 point guard of all time, or Prime Russ is one of the greatest players ever. And if you were only really following Twitter and highlights, I could see where you could get this opinion. Prime Russ is one of the best highlight reels ever, full of flashy passes and vicious dunks. But if you actually watched Russ play in full games between 2010 and 2020, there's no argument of him being a top 5 point guard of all time. Because although there is plenty of good with Russ, there is also a good chunk of bad that comes with it. I want to go through Russ in the playoffs because I feel like that's a good summation of my point. I want to thank random314157 on Reddit for compiling all these stats. Made my research way easier. In 2012, the Thunder make the finals, but Russ is largely carried by KD. In the Western Conference Finals, Russ takes 2 more shots than KD, but scores 68 less points. And Harden outscores Russ on 38 less shots. In the finals, Russ shows out in Game 4, but in the series as a whole, Russ takes 16 more shots than KD and scores 18 less points, all culminating on Russ shooting 4 for 20 in Game 5, and ultimately the Thunder go home. In 2014, Russ plays well in this playoff stretch, but it ultimately ends in a Game 6 against the Spurs that saw Russ shoot 4 for 15 in the fourth quarter and overtime. In 2015, Russ is a number 1 option for the first time in his career, and he doesn't make the playoffs. Okay, so 2016. He's okay in the Spurs series, which includes a 10 for 31 performance in Game 3, but here's the big one, the 3-1 collapse. Russ goes 11 for 28 and 7 turnovers in Game 5, 10 for 27 and 6 turnovers in Game 6, with 4 of those turnovers coming in the final minute and a half, and finally he goes 8 for 21 in a Game 7 where he only scores 5 points in the second half. I think it's without a stretch to say that the Thunder blew this lead because Russell Westbrook killed them. In 2017, I'll give credit where credit is due. Russ wins the MVP deservedly in a historic season and averages 37, 11, and 10 in a Series 1 loss to the Rockets. In 2018, Russ and the Thunder are expected to beat an inexperienced Jazz team in this series, and they win Game 1. But in Games 2 through 4, Russ goes 7 for 19, 5 for 17 with 8 turnovers, and 7 for 18 with 5 turnovers. They lose all 3 of these games, and the Thunder lose the series. I went to 2 of these games. Russ couldn't guard anyone defensively, and this whole series was an ass-kicking. 2019. In an elimination Game 5 against the Blazers, Russ shoots 11 for 31. He missed 20 shots. The rest of the Thunder missed 19 shots combined. This shot on screen ends Russ' time as a true number 1 in this league. He doesn't win a playoff series, doesn't win a road playoff game. I won't keep going. My point is proven. Russ obviously had great counting stats, but he couldn't stretch the floor. He was never an efficient scorer in general. He was often careless with the ball. He was only ever an above-average defender at his best, but atrocious at his worst. And if I need to win a big game, Russ would be far down on my list of players I'd take. Russ was a great player, a top 50 player in the history of the league. He should be celebrated, but we really need to slow the roll on the top 5 point guard or one of the greatest of all time thing. It just simply isn't true.